Okay, YouTube, today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite rifle designs ever. And I mean it. And that rifle design is the K31 Swiss. This rifle is probably one of the most interesting and lucrative type of rifles ever designed. At the time, they were experimenting with several straight pull rifles, and the Swiss in general, up until the point this rifle was adopted, had several straight pull style rifles. Probably the most unsuccessful straight pull rifle was the Ross, which was in 303 British. It was a highly accurate rifle, but lacked the field reliability that soldiers needed. However, many Canadian sharpshooters, and I think a few Americans may have used them in limited, service, made use of the Ross rifle. However, the K31 is really the first, truly viable and potent straight pull, bolt action rifle. The Model 1911 infantry rifle and some of the others that came along before it were very good, don't get me wrong. But this rifle was the cat's meow, especially if any of you, target shoot or know how accurate these rifles are. In fact, as soon as I can get to it, I'm going to show you guys some targets that I've shot with these rifles. Now, the one you see right here is a scoped K31. This uses the St. Marie scope mount. I'm going to show some close-ups of this in a second. And I just have a little cheap Tasco 3-9 on it. Very good little setup, very good grouping rifle. We're going to talk a little bit more about the hand-loaded components here in a minute. But that's that rifle. The one you see in the foreground here is a early model K31 with just standard iron sights. So we're going to talk a little bit about the ammo, reloading components, and I'm going to get a few close-ups of this rifle. This video is pretty much meant to be short and sweet and to the point. I'm not going to go into the history of this design and everything because, just like all the others, it comes from a long line of classic, military arms. And, these guns they have a lot of history and everything, like I said. But these rifles are the rifleman's rifle, period. I know that people give the Swiss a hard time because they didn't have to fight in World War II. But I tell you what, there's a reason that they didn't have to fight in World War II. And the K31 is it. The K31 was adopted in 1933, remained in service until 1958 when it was replaced by the STG 58 or the SIG 510. So it's definitely had a good service life, and it prevented the Swiss from having to result to armed conflict in World War II. That's got to say something for a rifle design. Swiss riflemen of the era were feared men, and anybody that thinks that the Swiss were pansies during World War II are wrong, because those men were feared. They were feared riflemen. So we're going to talk a little bit more about these. Let me change the camera angle, and we're going to talk about some other stuff here. Okay, the K31, they were made with two different types of stocks. One being a walnut stock that was produced on the earlier models, or used in the earlier models. I don't know how well you can tell. Let me see if I can zoom in here. And you can see that a lot of the early walnut ones have a nice kind of minor tiger striping to the wood. And mine is no different. As you can see, there's a little bit of striping. If I wanted to refinish this stock, I'm sure I could make it, kind of pop out a little more. I'm not exactly positive which year they switched to the beechwood stocks. But I believe around, I want to say probably 46 or 47, I think that's about right, they swapped to the beechwood stocks, which there's nothing wrong with them. But as you can see, this K31 has the beechwood stock. Just a lighter color, kind of a blonde look. So that's the two different types of stocks. Let me change the camera angle. I'm going to show you the Swiss crest on the right. Alright, we're going to zoom in on this Swiss crest here. Hopefully I can get this bad boy to focus. It's trying to. There we go. There's your Swiss crest. And as you know, anything the Swiss made, they usually had a crest of some sort. But very classic, very nice, very typical Swiss quality. Okay? So let me explain a little bit about this action here. The K31 Swiss uses a straight pull action, which essentially the refinement that they made on this rifle from the 1911 infantry rifle. The 1911 infantry rifle had a longer bolt, and it had a long piece that went out in front of the rearly opposed locking lugs, and essentially it just made the action longer. So what they did with the K31 Swiss was they contained the actual bolt itself within a shroud. Hold on a second, let me lock down the tripod and pull the bolt to the rear so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, they essentially moved the face of the bolt back into a sleeve, and then they made a camming surface in the bolt sleeve that is provided by this lever, of course, and there are dually opposed locking lugs inside of this rifle that the bolt itself cams into. Okay, so see the locking lugs? The bolt itself is kind of free floating in there. The sleeve itself locks into it. See, the 1911 infantry rifle had a design where, like I said, the bolt itself was like a long piece that came out of the front. So that's one of the revisions they made, in that they shortened the action so they can make the rifle a little shorter, a little easier to point, easier to manipulate. They shortened the barrel a little bit. They stuck with the 6-round magazine, but they did redesign the magazine, detachable box magazine. This holds 6 rounds. The original I believe it's 1899 infantry rifle, one of the first ones, used a lower power round, but actually had a 12-round magazine. So that's pretty interesting. So that's the basics, you know, of the action. The trigger itself breaks at around 3.5 pounds. If you watch, see that amount of slack it has? That's your initial first stage, and the second stage is a very clean and very almost match grade style 3 to 3.5 pound trigger pull. Very nice trigger. The ring on the end, I already made a video explaining what it's made for, but essentially you can recock the rifle if you need to, and to put the weapon on safe, you pull out and rotate over, and it locks the action and everything, and takes the sear engagement out. So that's pretty much the basics of the design. The sights on this gun are tangent inverted V-notch sights, similar to a Kar 98, adjustable to 1500 meters, which for this rifle is not optimistic. These rifles are very accurate. Maybe not 1500, but you could easily kill a man from 1,000 yards with this gun if you knew what you were doing. So that's pretty much the basics, you know, bare bones of the rifle design itself. I'm going to go ahead and reposition the camera. We're going to get a close-up of the way that this St. Marie mount actually mounts onto the rifle. And then we're going to cover the hand loading components. I'm going to show you the stripper clips.